Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. Today is part 2 of my interview with Phyllis about the Weston A Price Foundation and traditional eating. Today we move into some of my questions, such as whether these structural deteriorations can be reversed and some others. We also discuss how to implement diet changes and explore incorporating Weston Price's eating principles into a robust homeschool curriculum. You may recall Phyllis saying her speciality is soil health, and especially assisting organic farmers and those transitioning to organic. There are some websites in the description box regarding soil health and a link to the Weston Price website.
So many places that could be jumped off from there. So the thing that's on my mind most of all is that we've seen the degeneration. Can you reverse anything, let's say, in the structure of your face as you are living, or is it dependent upon, in utero? Secondly, how can you rejuvenate following generations if you had generations that started to live this way again? What do you know about that?
I'll start with the first one first. It highlights the importance of both parents, of conscious conception, if at all possible, eating a nutrient-dense, high-fat soluble vitamin, low-processed food diet for, preferably months before they conceive, and then the focus shifting to the mother and just high-quality cod liver oil, lots of egg yolks, raw milk products, and organ meat. Okay, it's just, you have to keep hammering all of those things in, and I would add a high-quality multivitamin, because it's just hard to get enough really good nutrition. And the high-quality multivitamins are a comparatively low-cost backup, but the emphasis really needs to be on food, particularly fat-based foods and organ meat. And I can just hear young women going, "Oh, Jesus, I absolutely hate liver." It's like, sweetheart, get over it. If you want healthy, intelligent, beautiful, easy children, you need to be eating liver several times a week while you're pregnant. Now, having said that, yes, it is possible to recover jaw width when children are very, very young. Getting your children to love raw liver and eat, drink cod liver oil as something special, or, egg yolks and those sorts of foods. There are periods of plasticity there where you can get tissue laid down in the jaw. Okay, and failing that being the remedy, there are dentists, I don't know of any in New Zealand, but there are in other places around the world, that instead of trying to correct crooked teeth by removing teeth, they expand the jaw to make more space for the teeth to come in. That's probably my recommendation. But yes, there can be some recovery. There are some amazing stories about recovering children who were from addicted mothers, who had Coke mothers or who had fetal alcohol syndrome when they were born, and that being reversed through nutrition. But it's through this level of traditional nutrition, which is not what most standard nutritionists or doctors consider when they think of nutrition. So they will say, "Oh, no, that's not possible." Yeah, it's not possible, because what they're recommending is a fat-soluble, deficient, low nutrient density diet. You're just not going to have the vitamins and minerals and activators and enzymes that make it possible to recover. Having said that, sort of a standard span for supposedly recovering the entirety of the genetically optimal structure is generally said to be 3 generations of excellent nutrition. But as Weston A Price proved, you can deteriorate the expression of our physical bodies within a generation as a result of poor nutrition. We also know in hindsight now, thanks to Weston A Price Foundation, we have examples of face width and beauty and health being recovered in the next generation when the parents were really diligent about their diets. Okay. And yes, absolutely, nutrition is key to reversing or eliminating almost all chronic conditions that we have. Heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, all of those things are in large part nutrition-based problems.
That actually does give hope to families who, well, it's a step of faith, really, isn't it? You're investing in generations yet unborn by investing in your family's health right now.
Absolutely. That and education. And the bottom line is, it's really hard to think accurately, to maintain focus and consistency, to set aims and see the big picture and stay on track if you're constantly battling some chronic disease, or you always have brain fog or any of the other debilitating and distracting conditions that happen as a result of poor nutrition.
It's been touched on briefly with our discussion so far, but I mentioned to you earlier, Phyllis, that I've had a discussion with a specialist in neurodivergent children, and the topic of diet came up with that. Have you got within your network case studies where it's been documented that this is how the child was, they implemented these changes, and now we've got this?
Yes. And I would suggest the Weston A Price Foundation is the best place to start looking, to the Weston A Price Wise Traditions journals, quarterly journals. So there are dozens and dozens of them have come out in the last 24 years. And at least half of the articles in those journals have actually been peer reviewed and appeared in other journals or appear in the Weston A Price Foundation journal with full scientific citations. They're almost boringly thorough and footnoted. So they're geared towards people who are super interested in nutrition and interested in scientific rigor. It's a blend, and they go out of their way in the more obscure or scientific jargon articles to give little abstract or précis or explanations that you can just skim for the major points. So I definitely recommend going through those journals. But yes, there are innumerable examples. Another possible source is the website Moms Across America. It tells the story. It's activist mothers who realized that their children's chronic diseases and attention deficit and hyperactivity were directly related to the foods that they were eating. Processed foods, canned foods, sugary foods, candies, and all of those things that, we have considered to be, innocuous if you're getting, a good diet and the rest of your, the rest of the time. Well, they found that once they dropped these excitotoxins and artificial flavors and high sugar foods out of their children's diet, they saw change within days.
Activist mothers, you've got me smiling there.
What it takes. That's what it takes.
I know. I mean, really, that just means mothers who take action.
Mm-hmm. Who think, see clearly, take committed action. And nobody ever said it was going to be easy, but man, is it worthwhile.
Well, it would even be worthwhile, I was thinking, even if you weren't totally convinced that it was something you wanted to change for the rest of your life, why don't you give it a start and an end date and conduct a serious experiment and then make a judgment call after that? That's got to be a reasonable thing to consider.
And I would suggest before you start, just because there tends to be, perspective shift as you go along and you forget how bad the problem was beforehand that you're wanting to solve, is that you list specific behaviors. Just can't get Johnny to bed. He's always just bouncing around and waking up in the middle of the night, or, can't sit still, or has eczema, or not doing particularly well in school, or unable to focus at home. Those sorts of observations maybe even give them numbers. Out of 1 out of 10, it's an 8 or 9. Write those down and put it away, and then come back to it and do another evaluation and compare what you see has changed.
Doable, very doable. Let's move into now getting to some nitty-gritty of how we can apply this in a homeschooling scenario. The thing that's on my mind is that most homeschoolers, unless they are absolutely committed to a super box curriculum where there's no flexibility, most homeschoolers can curate the curriculum to suit their family's needs, giftings, interests without compromising on any basics. So let's say that the entire principle of the Weston A Price Foundation, you could create an entire curriculum for as long as it was necessary or applicable, but everything else, from learning about the nutrition, from its very basics right through to some of the deeper dives in your vitamins and what are fat solubles, etc., through to planning meals and what proportions to use, through to choosing to raise and grow your own food, even in your own humble backyard, and even writing about it, not just factual journals, but creating fiction. I come from a Charlotte Mason background for home education, where you take really, really good books and ideas and you work from those. And it seems to me, Phyllis, that this lifestyle would be the perfect curriculum basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about it, I mean, it just kind of explodes out. You have biology, powers of observation, human history, and societies that you can explore. You look back on plagues and peoples and famines, and was nutrition part of this? You have all of the math, you have all of the learning core life skills like raising your own food and cooking. I mean, we absolutely must have children in the kitchen participating, observing from toddler stage, because it needs to be in their brains, in their bodies, and in their hands, that they can feed themselves, that they're not reliant on processed foods because they have no idea how to cook an egg, or they think they'll die if they eat a grass-fed egg yolk raw, or that raw milk will kill you. Those kinds of misconceptions are very, very damaging. And I think my agenda and part of this is we need to be thinking accurately. And for that, we need good brain development. We need fat-soluble substances. We need pure, nutrient-dense, high-mineral food in order to nourish both our bodies and our brains. And as a result, when you move towards that, it's easier to see narratives in the current around us that are propelling us to pay for expensive foods that are in effect poisoning us or making us ill, that are increasing medical costs, that are increasing or decreasing our ability to function fully as informed and active citizens. Those are dangerous trends. Having children who are well-nourished, intelligent, curious, grounded, are clear on their own values, and who can think and take action. That's, as parents, I believe, our greatest gift. And I think these traditional nutrition approaches have been proven scientifically to be the basis of all health. We have a tremendous ability here in New Zealand to do that so much more easily than in most other countries. So we should take advantage of it. And homeschooling is absolutely perfect. I love the idea of at least a portion of the curriculum exploring this whole concept of traditional nutrition and its impact on us now through the various, academic or learning lenses to it. And if you go to the Weston A Price website, and specifically look for, I haven't done this, but homeschooling programs or resources or, nutrition for kids, I'm sure you will find something there.
Oh, homeschool parents are highly motivated and very capable. So I'm thinking that obviously there's the Nourishing Traditions book, which would be a really interesting book as well as a good foundational book to have in the home. Those journals that you've mentioned in your website, that they might be at an academic level, but there'd be plenty in there to
Yes,
research.
and they're not just academic articles. They've got great letters to the editor. They have sections on homeopathy and nutrition. They have book and videos reviews. They have, humorous parts of it too. They have, the healthy baby picture gallery with, showing young children with lovely broad faces and all of these wonderful stories about how they sleep through the night and are curious and extraordinary. So, we've lost a lot, but we can gain that back, and it can happen within a generation.
Mm-hmm. So if I was homeschooling my kids again and I wanted to do this, here's what I do. I'm not a natural math person. I would just get the math book. But we know that we're going to be looking for raw milk and meat from a grass-fed, and most Kiwi ones are grass-fed things, and eggs. So I'd start looking at what are the nutritional information in that, and we would go and pull up books out of the library or on the internet or whatever with my kids. And I'd start looking at what is it about the cell membrane that is so important to the fat content going around it, and explore that. And then I would want to go and find out, well, where are these farms, and can we go and visit and have a field trip and watch them, how they milk their cows, how they prepare them, how they keep it clean, how they process it, and then go home and write about it and do some art with it. I'd talk to the farmers and get them to talk to the children. I'd go and visit a free-range egg farm. I mean, really.
So look, go take a shovel and look at the soil.
Yes. Okay, how then, let's say for a homeschool science thing that you want to do, you want to assess the soil in your own suburban garden. That'd be a great science project. What would be deficient? What do we need to supplement it with? Tell them what they would do, Phyllis. You're the expert here.
Right. Well, the first thing I would do is get out your shovel. There are just a heartening number of online resources more oriented towards non-farmers, non-soils people. So that would be my suggestion. I'd even start with the video Netflix of Kiss the Ground. Okay? Kiss the Ground. It's an excellent introduction to regenerative/organic agriculture. And in all of this, you have to remember, this as homeschoolers, right? Because you're already pushing the envelope. You're already doing something that is considered, socially marginal, slightly weird, okay, different. You understand that the way people are trained, in effect, to view things can be wildly different. And you will find that in the medical industrial complex. You will find that in the agrochemical industrial complex. You will find it in the food industry narrative, which is in effect, trust us, we've got the science behind us, we know what we're doing. You don't have to worry about this, just do what we say. We have great products and we're looking after your best interests. In my experience as a government policy and environmental policy analyst whose husband specialized in regulatory capture of government agencies, that narrative is exactly the opposite of what it appears. We are not being protected. We are not being fully informed, and we are certainly not being looked after. For me, one of the most important things to teach children is to evaluate narratives. Why are people saying this? Why is this true? And I got to share that when I was tasked with deciding whether or not a science paper or a policy orientation were valid scientifically, the first thing I would do was to follow the money. Who paid for this study? What has this researcher done before? What is the background of all of these people? Are they being paid? Do they have conflicts of interest that would skew them to actually changing the results, to affecting the outcome, to being non-scientific, to doing, as we used to call it, tobacco science? I just want to warn you that controlled or contrived narrative about nutrition, and particularly about the value of saturated animal fats, and the narrative around pesticides in agriculture are two of the most controlled and fallacious, damaging narratives that I know of, in the last 40 or 50 years. So just be prepared that you will find lots of crossed fingers and don't you dare drink raw milk and saturated animal fat causes heart disease. All of these things have been disproved repeatedly. So just brace yourself for that. And I think it's extremely valuable that you can see with your children where these narratives come from and actually observe in your own setting, in your own health, in your own growing of your own food and accessing it. That's not actually the way it has to be, that there are alternatives and there are things that we can make an extra effort to do that will result in better health and happiness. Mm-hmm. So the soil thing, I would suggest you look for something called the Visual Soils Assessment, or the VSA. There's simple ways of doing it, but basically it's digging in the dirt and just seeing what you look at. Is it dark brown? Does it smell like the forest floor? Are there lots of little tiny critters moving around in it? Do you see earthworms? How does it change in color and structure from, the top going deeper and deeper? Is it well aerated? What you're ideally looking for is deep, dark soil, the texture and appearance of chocolate cake, lots of air, soil that holds moisture well, soil that has lots of roots, okay? That will be healthier soils. When you pull the roots up of any plant, just grass or weeds, you want to see brown roots. You want to see little tiny granules of darker brown soil attached to those white growing roots, okay? So most roots and root tips are white, but if you have a healthy soil with diverse microbiology, there will be organisms, bacteria, fungi, azotobacter, protists from the soil in the gazillions actually clinging to those roots in a barter and exchange. There's the Wall Street, the stock exchange happening on every single micromillimeter of those roots, where nutrients from the soil are being processed, digested, and exchanged with those roots for sugars, proteins, amino acids, and signaling molecules from the plant. It's just an astonishingly complex and marvelous system that is the basis of all of plant life, read all of our nutrition. So it's good to get to know that. Absolutely. I strongly recommend looking for some online resources for teaching regenerative agriculture or organic agriculture and soils to children. And you can start a project in your backyard where you may never have grown vegetables before, and you will see the transformation. You can definitely chart the change from gray, dead soil to chocolate cake within a year or two. You will see changes. If you add a lot of organic matter, if yes, you add lime and traces, but the most important thing is to keep a living root growing in that soil 24/7. Bare soil is soil headed in the wrong direction. You have to have the plants and the plant roots and that stock exchange happening underground to really get healthy soils that deliver nutrient density and no chemicals. That's my pitch for a soils session, if you will, a soil part of the curriculum.
That's a pretty intense curriculum. That would be such a blast to be able to study that with your homeschooling, all of the extra things that you would learn alongside it. I feel quite excited about that. And I'm disappointed that my kids have all finished.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about this is you can actually measure the change in vitamin and mineral content of the food you eat and the food you grow. Compare, for example, the vitamin and mineral content, what we call total dissolved solids, of lettuce or silver beet that you buy from the supermarket versus what you're able to grow at home when your soils have come to a certain degree of health. We have simple, not wildly expensive devices called refractometers that measure that like in real time, just by expressing the sap out of the leaves or the roots or the fruit or the vegetable and putting it on a refractive plate. I use them all the time when I'm consulting. It's what viticulturalists use to test whether or not they have enough sugar in the grapes to be able to sustain fermentation.
This is magic. Where do I get some of that? One of those?
You can get them at horticultural supply stores, PGG Wrightson's, Hort Supplies, and they're like $150. They don't have any batteries. They will last you for 3 lifetimes. And it's fascinating seeing how much difference there can be in the nutrient density depending upon how the plant is grown. And that difference in nutrient density, vitamin and mineral content, transfers up the food chain to the animals, and from the animals, into us in terms of the product we eat. We know milk from cows that have been grass-fed, diverse pastures have more vitamin A, more vitamin D, decidedly more vitamin K2, heaps more conjugated linoleic acid, and all of those essential fatty acids. Just because the soil is healthy, the pasture is diverse, and the cows are not being poisoned with antibiotics or chemicals. It makes a big difference in what lands in your mouth. All depends on whether or not you started out from healthy soils.
I've got another question, a personal curiosity question. What are your thoughts about eating mostly, Weston A Price principles, of course, from your genetic food heritage?
Sort of 2 slightly different angles on that, I would say. I don't really subscribe to the eating to your blood type.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Weston A Price was able to show pretty conclusively, barring further research, that the diets from traditional cultures, as different, literally, as I said to begin with, from the Inuits in the Arctic Circle to people in tropical jungles, the overall amount of fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A and D, and the nutrient density, the mineral content of what they were eating, although it was widely varying, those amounts were still very similar. Okay, so it didn't matter whether you were an Eskimo or a pygmy, you were still, through eating your traditional diet consistent with your environment, you were still, possibly not the case of pygmies since they're so short, it did affect their stature. But take, for example, the Maasai, who mostly drink milk or blood, versus the Inuit, who mostly eat blubber of some description and fish. However, when he analyzed their diets, they were getting similar amounts of fat-soluble vitamins and nutrient-dense minerals. And that's the reason why they all tended to have, although their racial features were different, they all had wide dental arches, they all had easy births, they had no chronic disease. So that kind of tells us that there is a universal, fairly consistent between races need for minimal amount of these fat-soluble vitamins and minerals. Sure, eat your traditional racial diet. But for most of us, I mean, we probably wouldn't be too keen on eating a lot of insects or having a diet mostly of seal blubber. And for that reason, a European style source of those foods is more palatable and acceptable to us culturally. But if we wanted to go on a diet that was, I mean, and some people do that are, extremely carnivore, if you can handle that, go for it. There's a wide range of food you can use, but it's super important that it be grown from healthy soils with next to no chemicals, and that ideally you are focusing strongly on, to the extent that while we still can, seafood and fat-based animal products.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's really helpful. Phyllis, is there anything else you would like to say as we pull it all together again?
I would just like to commend all the parents, and with a particular nod to you mothers, to thank you for what you're doing for your children and ultimately for all of us as society. You clearly have guts and intelligence and stick-to-itiveness. So I encourage you to, add another layer of caring and health, to your family's life, and look seriously at the nutrient density and viability for health of what you're feeding your families, because you can turn their health around.
Not only have you given us hope, Phyllis, but you've told us how to do it. And I've had a real blast talking with you. I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
My pleasure. And yeah, go get them.
Amen.
Amen.
I hope you have been inspired and are ready to implement changes in your family's health. It will take wisdom and time, but keep the long-term goal in mind, not just their health, but your grandchildren and great-grandchildren yet unborn. If you have found this podcast to be helpful to you, I would truly appreciate it if you could subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you.